You don't want that. Yeah. Oh, that sounds scary to me.
This so man like this. You doing the roof or something? This guy sleep, man. He got his leg up.
Right. They can do anything while you're sleeping.
Bid up, put this dummy stuff in there. They take that back out, put the real stuff in there. Once they put that in there, put the glue up there.
Okay.
That's it.
He just gave that video to scare you.
Like I said, he just was on the paper and all his clients, that's what they do. I said, I want this, look at that before they didn't come.
That's right. Yeah. So you want to avoid that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I just got a lot. She made she had she was still working for 15 years.
Oh, good. Okay.
She's real up and by the
All right, looks like we're all present accounted for. Since it's 6 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order and for this special meeting. And the first thing is a resolution for surf, wind, and fire food truck Sunday event. And is Timmy Turner here? Yeah, here we go. Thank you, Timmy.
Thank you. So I know we've tried a couple times in December and failed to have another block party event, but we are hoping to have one on Sunday, February 5th. And once again, I'm asking for a resolution for people to be able to drink their alcoholic beverages on King Street during that event. So they can take a beverage from our place or from Edenton Bay Trading Company, visit the food truck, visit the Sugar Fig, or King Street Marketplace down the block while they enjoy their Sunday afternoon.
Will the bakery be open by chance?
Yes, yes, they are planning on being open on Sundays when we do special events.
And what are your hours?
Our hours are usually noon to 4 on Sundays. A couple of the food trucks we've been talking to have asked if we could open at 11 during those events, just because that seems to be a good time for lunch to start for food trucks.
Make a motion to approve the resolution, Mayor.
I'm sorry?
I make a motion to approve the resolution.
Okay.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Thank you for doing it.
Thank you very much for your support.
Absolutely. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank
You may proceed.
Thank
Thank you very much for doing it. Okay, the next is a presentation for the Special Sports Facility Network Recreation Master Plan Study, and that's Gabby Fresh and Dwayne.
I think we have Evan Ellis from the Sports Facility Network to give a presentation, discuss phase 1 and phase 2 of the project. If he wanted to go ahead and start, then he can go ahead and introduce himself and answer any questions.
Okay, Gabby and Evan. Floor is yours.
Yeah, double check, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Carry on.
Sounds like a rifle commercial.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good evening. I'm Evan Eliff. I am one of the partners of the Sports Facilities Companies. I'm also the president of our planning services. In talking to Dwayne, he asked if I could just take a couple of minutes and walk through the scope of services that we've outlined. So in the next 5 or 6 minutes, I'll just give you a brief overview of who we are and what we do as an organization. I will talk to you about our proposed scope of services for phase 1 in a little bit of detail. And then I'll put that into perspective of how we help communities like yours actually move down the path of planning into development and ultimately into successful operations for sports, recreation, wellness, and community-based facilities. And then some time at the end for questions and answers. So just very briefly, Sports Facilities Companies, we were founded in 2003, primarily as a feasibility planning company. Over the last 20 years, we've evolved to the country's leading firm for planning, development, and management of all levels of community, recreation, sports, and wellness facilities. So what we do is, in a situation like this, we saddle ourselves up to you, to your project team, to key stakeholders, and we start to understand the community's needs. We do that in an approach that allows us to first define success, and then to develop a path to getting on success with a plan that leads you to the identification of both facilities and programs that will serve your residents, and make sure that we're taking a look at flexible use and multi-generational programming, which we understand already is a very important piece of the fabric of your community. So we've done this kind of work in over 2,500 communities. We also are developing right now 17 facilities across the country, helping to bring them out of the ground through construction. And we also manage facilities in 21 different states, over 45 facilities ranging from seasonal outdoor aquatic parks all the way through some of the largest sports tournament facilities in the entire country. The closest facility that we manage to you, just for a frame of reference, is the Rocky Mount Event Center, a little bit west of you, of course, in Rocky Mount. That's a facility that we helped through the initial planning phase and then helped to consult as a design expert, really looking through the lens of operations. And we've managed that facility since it opened and continue to manage that facility, serving this balance of their local recreation needs and also sports tournaments and events that we attract and host at that facility. In terms of serving Edenton and your town and your residents, we've outlined sort of a two-phased approach. I'll just actually go through the details of phase one. I'm happy to answer questions about the next steps. But in phase one, we start with what we call market opportunity analysis. And that starts with a project kickoff call where we just sort of get an understanding generally of who's going to be on the project team, what the project history is, sort of how the town got to where you are today in terms of identifying the need to come up with a plan to serve your recreation needs throughout the entire town and possibly surrounding areas. We'll talk through any existing data that we should be aware of so that we can request and review that data, and then we'll get into discussions and interviews with some key potential partners and stakeholders. Ultimately, we'll talk about dates and deadlines for the project and answer any questions that you've got. From there, as I mentioned, we will request any existing data, master plans, existing facility information, your improvement plans for any of your assets, whether those are indoor or outdoor, aquatic, senior centers, fields, etc. And we'll start to perform a market analysis to understand how many people live in your area, how those people are served through sports, recreation, and other community-based facility and program services and service providers. And ultimately, that will set the tone for step three. Now in step three, we provided two separate options. One, which we are very effective at, is a remote step three, where we'll facilitate sort of a half day, typically 3 to 4 hour planning session, where we will start to define success with your project team and understand the parameters of any developments that may occur. Now, alternatively to doing that single remote via Zoom session, we can actually travel to market. We can go see any sites, potential sites, known sites, or prospective sites that you want to look at. We'll meet in person with stakeholders and key user groups from the community. We'll tour your parks and recreation facilities, and we'll tour the market at large. We'll still have that same development planning session, but obviously we will spread out a little bit further than that and have some additional meetings and some key conversations that will give us additional insight and information, especially from your residents and some of your program providers. So we may meet with any existing sports groups, aquatics groups, users of your park systems, any associations that may be important for us to connect with. Could be the chamber, regional or local convention and visitors bureau, or any groups involved in tourism, any economic development partners or organizations that you think are important. And of course, we'll tour senior centers, we'll talk about senior housing, and we will interact with your senior population as well, if those are groups that you'd like us to meet with in person. Ultimately, step 4 is where we'll deliver our actual product in phase 1. That is fairly high level, but it is a market opportunity and recommended facilities report. It's where we will ultimately identify what's most important to you and what facilities and programs are missing, so that we can make recommendations for facility improvements or new facility developments or new programs that should be added to expand your offerings to your residents. And so within that phase one set of options, option A, which doesn't require a trip to the market and has fewer meetings, although we can still set up some remote meetings with some key user groups, is scoped out at $19,500. If you do want us to travel to market, we will bring 2 people to market. We'll be there for 2 to 3 days. We'll work the schedule out in advance, make sure that we've got proper time and lead up to those meetings so that everyone who wants to have their voice heard in an in-person meeting will set that up. And so that's a $26,000 study plus, of course, the cost of travel. From there, you'll have the option of proceeding into the next phase, and rather than go into the details of phase 2, I thought it would be best to sort of outline what we call concept to concrete. So over the last 20 years since we've been in business, we've helped more than 200 facilities go from early stage planning through actual development and operations. And the way that we get them on the path is through this phase 1, where we're really understanding the market, the feasibility of expanding facilities and or programs in the market. From there, phase 2, as we've outlined in our proposal, is a financial feasibility study where we actually start to put opinion of cost or detailed opinion of cost and financial projections to understand the long-term revenue generation and expenses that need to be considered when thinking about expanding facilities. From there, we can go into project implementation. If you choose, we could be alongside you through the development and construction phase. Ultimately, if you need our services beyond that, we can help to develop operations, build websites, build a marketing plan, help to start your programs so that when you get to grand opening and cutting the ribbon on any new facility, whether those are sports, recreation, wellness, senior, outdoor park system, whatever it may be, we can help to get them so that they're pre-booked and pre-programmed and people are ready to come in and the operation is ready to serve those residents and those visitors when you open. And ultimately, we also provide full-scale management services and operational services for any facilities that we're part of. So that sort of outlines the process and where this starts to get you on the path and what the path could be from there. Typically, it's a 2 to 3 year process, including getting the funding together and then getting the design in place, constructing a facility or set of facilities. Obviously, that can expand, or in some cases, we've done it a lot shorter. It's about a 20-month total timeline for the Myrtle Beach Sports Center in Myrtle Beach, a 100,000 square foot facility we plan, help to develop, and then manage to this day in Myrtle Beach. So with that, I really appreciate your time, the chance to talk through our services, our phase 1 proposal. Happy to answer any questions about our company or our proposal, our scope of work, or how we do what we do.
Anyone have any questions of Eddie?
How much time did the phase 1 take?
We target a 3 to 5 week time frame from the development planning session. Now, just to go back sort of in order, the development planning session is part of phase 3. So typically the total process is more like a 6 to 7, sometimes an 8 week timeline, just depending on coordinating. Again, especially if we travel to market, we want to make sure that we give plenty of time to send out the announcements and to invite people to those meetings, so that can expand the timeline a little bit. I would commit to under an 8 week timeline, but really we target 3 to 5 weeks from the time that we actually have that development planning session, and or if we're in market, the stakeholder meetings, the community tour, the facilities tour.
Is your plan, is it facility based? Is the plan to develop a facility that would serve the community, or is it broader in terms of other recreational activities?
Both. So oftentimes that ends up being facility based, but through the process, as we start to learn more about your communities, we start working with your team, we may recognize that rather than facilities, there are other partnerships, other services, or other programs that you could offer and integrate into your existing assets. So it can be a combination of both. Oftentimes what we find is the reason that a town is not offering all of the services and meeting all of the desired programs of your residents is because you don't have the assets to do it. So oftentimes that does lead into the recommendation for the consideration of facilities, but it can also turn out to be purely programmatic.
So Corey, this right here, is it for both the recreation center as well as our neighborhood parks, and any other future projects or just water?
Yep, so with this phase one, project, the initial goal is to identify what the gaps are, in, as far as recreational needs. That could include any type of recreational facility, any longer, long-term project. But also, as Evan mentioned, it does help us to identify what those local needs are for those recreational improvements that we need around our neighborhood parks. So it includes both. We're curious to see, when we talk about gap analysis of what could be versus what we have existing. It would be very interesting to find out if there's any type of economic drivers that we're missing out on when we consider recro-tourism. I know that we've had some conversations around enhancing opportunities for things that we don't have now. We know our neighborhood parks are going to be a primary focus to begin with, but there's so much additional assets within the town that may not be utilized properly when we talk about some of the core initiatives that we looked at, when we talked about really digging into the bike and pedestrian plan that we just really talked about, when we talked about green space, when we talked about nature trails. I think that's what we consider as gaps. We know what a lot of the community needs are around the neighborhood parks, but I think this will also, in addition to creating those, what are those needs for those parks? Is there anything that we're missing out on that you could sustain here? And
Can I follow up? So this is a question for, what's his name? Evan. Yeah, I mean, like, if you're in Brevard, they don't have any water. We got water. I mean, would that be I think that needs to be a central focus of any type of recreational plan we do that includes water activities and how to draw people into things. We've got a sailing program, but I mean, how to increase that around, the recreational needs around water.
I think that's, Councilman Dixon, that is a place that I think is a gap.
Yeah.
And I would hope that Evan and his group would take those assets into consideration as far as what do we do going forward.
Yeah. So Evan, have y'all ever worked with any water towns?
Absolutely, yeah. And so, activation of your waterways is oftentimes a very important component. Looking at boat slips, looking at opportunities for paddle, kayak, canoes, stand-up paddle boards. But there's also another important factor that we always look at, especially in towns near water with a lot of water access, and that is water safety. Making sure that we've got the proper space and time and programs dedicated to helping people ensure that they're safe in the water, so swim lessons and other water-based programs to make sure that, especially your kids are safe with all of that access to the waterfront, whether it's programmed or not. We want to make sure that kids have equity and access to swim lessons in safe and controlled environments. So it sort of touches both. Activate the waterway, making sure you are water safe.
And just to follow that up, do y'all sort of do just an overall environmental assessment? I know a lot of these things create runoff and all of that. I mean, so I think we're a community that wants to be environmentally sensitive, and so if you have fields and that kind of stuff, I mean, do you help us figure out a way to do that in a way that would not hurt the environment?
So we partner in terms of environmental. So we are not environmental consultants or environmental engineers, but what we make sure we do is identify where the gaps are and what facilities need to be considered to close those gaps. And ultimately, as you get into the project implementation, phase 3, and pre-design, understanding the true environmental impact and anything from detention and retention through, potentially even credits for building on brownfield if you've got anything that may be available for that or applicable for that. All of those are part of the process. Our initial focus and the reason that we like to start with this smaller scale phase 1 is to be asset and program driven so that then we can work towards a development plan in partnership with the experts on the environmental side to ensure that it all comes together in something that meets every one of your needs and does take environment and long-term environmental sustainability into account.
Were you looking at cycling opportunities in the community?
Looking at what?
I'm sorry,
Cycling?
couldn't hear.
Will you be looking at cycling opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. Cycling can be as simple as paths that are, available for bikes to be used, and looking at the multimodal, so walking, biking, driving, any level of access to your community parks. Also, there are projects that we worked on. We worked on velodrome projects, which are, bike tracks, bike loops, BMX parks that we've developed, et cetera. So there's a wide range of cycling, but absolutely that's part of the gap analysis that we'll undertake.
So Evan,
All right, does anybody else have any further questions of Evan? All right, and please note, we are dealing with phase one tonight. That's all we're dealing with now, is phase one, and I need a motion. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
1 second. Corey, you had something you want to say?
so the one thing to note here, and I'm hoping that we can share with this because share with council and the general public on this, I'm very excited about the opportunity to look at the fitness and wellness piece. And I think one of the things that Evan and his group will help us with for that is the idea about what partnerships exist to help to make sure that our citizens are healthy and living an active lifestyle. And I think that when we look at some of our existing assets, that I think there's been very few improvements that have taken that into account. And I think that's something that's really promising for us. I know some of the residents have talked about distance of trails, distance of loops, fitness equipment, pull-up equipment. I know we have some organizations here that do a lot of outdoor health and fitness in the mornings early, and I think that having these things stationed, that's something that our neighborhood parks potentially, that's another gap that I think that we will be able to address here.
Dwayne, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Not Brad, no, sir, just the electricity piece.
All right, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? All right, motion carried. Evan, you have your permission to move forward. All right, item C is a budget amendment for the recreation master plan, and Corey, that's yours.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing to add here, this is the budget amendment. Virginia worked very hard for this and the next budget amendment to try to make sure that we could afford what we were going after. This budget amendment is for $19,500. Just know the budget amendment tonight, the funding that we had looked back at was from the Conger building sale. There was funds set aside from that would be for community enhancement, and we feel like this would be a good source of funds for that. Second thing to add here, we'll be coming back in the future. We met with the folks from the SF network through our partners at Electricities. And so once we get everything together from them after the service agreement is signed, I did want to share here, they're going to partner with us. And I shared this in the agenda memo that was sent out. Initially, there was a $9,000 grant they were going to help us with for just the phase one. We were able to get the newly revised service contracts back to them. They replied to us late Friday evening after the packet had been out, and to our benefit, there's currently a $7,500 grant that they're going to assist us with for phase one, and then in addition to that, there's an additional $7,500 that they would like to set aside if we choose to go with the phase two project. So all in all, Electricities is going to help us with roughly $15,000 of the cost of this program, because there is some economic development pieces to this that they saw. So I did want to share that. But
Do you think there's a good chance of receiving this grant?
yes. So the budget amendment tonight, although in its infancy, is for the initial $19,500 for phase one only. It doesn't include a phase two piece, and it doesn't include any credits that we get for grants from electricities towards either one of the phases. We would do that in the future.
So we've got enough money to afford the full amount regardless of whether we get the grant or not, but we'll still pursue that grant.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And again, it would be taken out of the sale, is that right?
Yes.
Any further questions of Corey? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Negative? Motion carries. Okay, the next one is another budget amendment for the airport, industrial park, and lot improvements. And Corey?
Thank you, Mayor. Again, the budget amendment as presented tonight is in total for $25,000. This is for the site prep of 5 parcels that were recently acquired by the town from the Edenton partnership. The pricing, the budget amendment presented will allow these lots to be shovel ready. We've worked very closely with the Edenton partnership to help develop the industrial park to try to grow our commercial and industrial clients here. And again, Virginia did an outstanding job for budgetary reasons this year. We had initially estimated revenues on our investments to be around $1,000 because of the interest rates that we had saw historically, and surprisingly to our benefit, with some of the changes, our investments have netted us over $63,000. So Virginia's wonderful forecasting skills for that, as well as some good luck. We do have the funds for that. The increase in revenue from these investments will cover the $25,000 in costs for the site prep.
I know it's early, but do we have any businesses that just might be interested in one of those lots?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Corey, what kind of businesses do you foresee there and how would it benefit the airport?
So for these parcels, by having them fixed to the airport parcel themselves, what this allows us to do in the future, we'll have lots available for any type of carrier service or parcel service for post. There's a potential a new hangar space for any type of maintenance or repair that comes around the aviations. It could be upholstery, it could be radio communications. It'd be wonderful if there was an opportunity for us to get a state entity near the industrial park and use our facilities. There's a wide range of businesses that we're really going to work with the partnership on to really promote these spaces.
And are all 5 of the parcels contiguous to the airport property?
Yes, that's correct.
Any further questions? If not, all those in favor of the motion, I need a first, a second. Got a
I'll
motion.
make a motion.
I
Got a
say,
motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Motion carried. All right, that ends our special meeting, and now we will move into our committee meetings. And the first one is the administrative committee, and that's chaired by Councilman Hyde.
thank you, Mayor Stallings. I see that we have our attorney here tonight, but on the Confederate Monument update, it's a fairly brief update, but it does represent progress. I have discussed the ongoing litigation with our town attorney, and he reports to us that settlement talks have begun and that they are proceeding in a positive fashion, and they're making progress in that regard. And we're hopeful that those negotiations between the attorneys for the parties will progress to the point that we will have at our next regular meeting a report from our attorney and possibly something to even discuss as it relates to the settlement of that matter. Anything else that I would need to add to that, Hood?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. One other matter that is somewhat related to the Confederate monument, there was a lot of discussion on social media the last couple of days, and I have had direct questions about the matter and direct complaints to me that the town of Edenton used its money to put up the billboard in Bertie County. And the billboard was funded by a group called Emancipate North Carolina. And I understand they're out of Durham in collaboration with our local Move the Monument Coalition. So for the general public that has asked those questions and complained on social media, that was not town money that was used to fund that, but that was that group. The two groups in the collaboration I mentioned. So I thought it was important to clarify that, since we had gotten so much discussion on that and so many questions. As far as any action that we need on this item, just recommend that we place it on the agenda for next time, and possibly be ready to place it on the closed session agenda in the hopes that the settlement negotiations proceed to the point that we would have something to actually discuss and possibly even vote on.
One question, can we ask questions about what kind of settlement being looked at?
That would not be appropriate at this time. That's between the two attorneys. We don't have anything to discuss right now. Yeah, and Mr. Ellis will bring it to us as soon as we do. So we would just ask that move forward. The second item on our agenda for our committee is the Town of Edenton 2023 vision statement. Last week, the mayor, the town council, and our assistant manager and town manager conducted an annual planning retreat, and we had several citizens that attended, and I think they were here tonight. We appreciate your participation. But we developed a vision statement, and the town manager and the administrative council recommends that the council consider that at our next meeting and vote on approving that, hopefully. We have listened to our citizens the last month or so when we had discussions regarding the matter, and the vision statement focuses very heavily on recreation, housing, and local business development, and that would be available, I assume, upon request to your office, Corey, if the public wanted to take a look at that. But our committee recommends that it move forward to our next meeting for a vote on it.
You all did a good job of putting that together based on our testimony. Really a very well done document.
Yeah, I agree.
And so in addition to that, Councilman High, when that's approved at full council on the 14th of February, we will try to have hard copies of that document available, as well as an updated online link to be able to see the 2023 vision statement.
I think it'd be a good idea too, every January, maybe go through the vision statement again and update it.
Well, hopefully we can get an annual planning session going.
Yeah,
I felt it was very productive.
Yeah, I thought it was very,
council
very
too,
good.
so.
Yeah, and my question on that, Councilman Costin, is, COVID got in the way of so many things, and you're new, Roger and I just came on right before the pandemic. Is that something in the past, you guys that have been there for a while, did we do that annually?
We did annually.
Can we kind of make that maybe a commitment to do that annually, because I felt like it was very productive, and I know everybody I talked to felt like it was really, really helpful.
We can do that.
Okay. The next item on our committee agenda is the elected official stipend. Back in July of 2022, Corey Gooden came to us and requested more time to review the elected official stipend, and asked that we place this on the agenda in the beginning stages of 2023 to allow him time to research that issue and come back to us with his recommendations. And Corey, if you could fill us in on what you've done on that and what you feel like we need to consider.
Thank you, Councilman High, that's correct. It's been since 2018 that this was evaluated. Virginia and I had spoke on this matter back in April or May of calendar year 22, and the goal at that time was to review this, which we were unsuccessful at, and I know that we met in August of 2022. This year we brought it back up, and we decided to inform council that we will wait till after the first of the year and to get into calendar year 2023 before we revisited this. At this time, I have reviewed the league municipalities' data and determined that the proposed increase of $50 a month for the mayor and $100 a month for council would be representative. When reviewing this data, there were multiple things that were considered when identifying where our peers are. Those were population similarities, as well as a location that promotes itself as a destination, which Edenton does very well, and also does these locations have an attractive Main Street program. Those were three things that I thought would identify who our closest peers are. Those locations were included in your packet, and at this time, upon council's approval, I do recommend moving that for the committee forward to full council.
Certainly, and I think as far as our administrative committee is, I believe that two of the members, all three of us are in favor of moving it to a full vote. I think two of us are in favor of increasing that stipend, and one of us has not made up his mind on that particular issue, but in any event, it does seem like it's right to move forward to full council at next meeting. And we would just ask that we place on the.
Can I say one quick thing?
Yeah.
I just saw it on here, I haven't participated in this at all, but I'm really not for this. I think that we make enough money, I think we, with all we got going on in town, I just think it's better, we don't give ourselves a raise, and I'll probably vote against it, just because I think that this is a public service, and I mean, it's not much of a bump, but I just said.
I agree with Sam. If we do consider, I say let's consider it for next year's budget rather than for this year.
I just think it's enough. I think we get paid enough. I try to give mine away to charitable stuff here, and I just think that it's not a good idea. I mean, just.
Well, why don't we,
And I'm just one vote, so I mean,
yeah, well, why don't we,
and I'm not gonna die on this issue at all.
yeah, well, why don't we move it forward,
That's fine.
to a vote, and I personally like, Councilman Coleman's recommendation that if anything's done, that it would not affect this budget year, even if we have the money. And I didn't mean to speak, for Elton and Craig when I mentioned that I think two of us are in favor of it, and one of us, still forming his opinion on it, but the one who's still forming his opinion on it is myself, and I share Councilman Dixon's view of it. We raised taxes last year. I know I didn't do it for the money, and I don't like the timing of it. We're in the middle of inflation and our people are struggling, so I'm not so sure that I would vote for it either. But in any event, I do recommend that we move it forward. I'll keep an open mind on it. I do like Roger's idea about it.
And I really appreciate all the hard work, and I mean, it's probably merited, but I just think it's a bad idea to, let's just.
Yeah. Councilman Bond, if you want to weigh in on it.
I'm like Roger. I think we look at it, talk about it, and see what it looks like next year.
Getting the biscuit.
I wouldn't put any more burden on the town right now.
And our vote could be, we could structure the vote any way we want to. It could be an absolute thumbs up, an absolute thumbs down, or let's talk about it as we're doing the budget for 2023, 2024.
That's more appropriate.
And yeah, that feels more appropriate, but I would like us to still have the discussion. You put a lot of work into it, and I appreciate it, and I will say to my fellow councilmen, my attitude on it is not a reflection of my appreciation for what y'all do. I know how hard you work, and you work really hard outside these couple hours each week that we meet, and I know that, and I don't want my comments to seem disrespectful to you guys. Yeah, that's just my feeling on it.
Not at all.
Okay, well, we'll move it forward for discussion at February's meeting. The next item on the administrative committee's agenda is a public information officer job description. One thing that came out of last week's annual planning retreat was the need for a public information officer. And the idea behind that, if you look at the job description, would be more than just some PR type of person. This person would wear a lot of different hats. As we understand the budgetary implications to it, it appears that we do have the money to hire this person. And I will say this, one of the biggest complaints that I receive is that the town does not have as much of a presence on social media as many people feel like it should, and also we're slow to react to things that we see on social media, and we're also slow to react to misconceptions that might be out there. And I think it's timely today we talked about the misconceptions surrounding the billboard that was put up, and the allegation or the general thought out there that we paid for it. If we had a public information officer, he could handle those types of misconceptions. And also, over the last year or two, we've seen an increase in public records requests, and some of those got to be burdensome on our existing staff, including Corey. And it would be anticipated that the job description would include answering public records requests. Is that my understanding, Corey?
That's correct. There would be clerk duties for the board and for the public records request as part of that job description, yes.
I think too, I mean,
No, you're fine.
the,
You're good.
the ability to respond more quickly to concerns expressed by residents, sometimes it's, or you get so overburdened with that on a given day, this person is understanding but also helping and getting back with concerns that might be expressed.
Yeah.
And doing that.
And to add on to that, I guess just fulfilling the transparency piece as well, just, you know, between the town and citizens, kind of keep you in the know a little bit. So that's the piece that I like.
Yeah. And would we foresee, Corey, that that public information officer being our one voice, and would work together with you and the mayor to make sure that we at least had some consensus for him responding in the way that we did? And I know, like Councilman Costin said, you know, sometimes we could accused of not being transparent enough. And I will say this, as an individual council member, I'm very, very careful not to respond to everything that I see, because I'm only one person and I don't speak for the entire council. And I think all of us take that very, very seriously. But if we had one person and we could get some consensus between the mayor and the manager, and if it was, you know, highly sensitive, that you may chat with us and go ahead and get that information out there, I think it would build public trust in what we're doing.
Yeah, and I just want to add, I mean, I think it would help let Corey do a little bit more of what he needs to be doing, because I mean, I was in the coffee shop with him, I think we've all sat there on the day and, you know, gone over stuff, and somebody came up and wanted to talk about the tree being cut, wanted to talk about that water meter getting messed up, wanted to talk about the bird and the electric meter. I mean, yeah, it's just like, when he goes out in public, it's just bam, 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 and it'd be great to give you, I mean, you need some time freed up to manage the town.
And we've got a lot of big projects out there that are gonna take a lot of Corey's attention. And quite frankly, we'd rather work on those projects than, you know, responding to every single need that's out there. I think it would be a good thing. I think more than anything, you know, it would help Corey, but it'd also help the general public.
And this person would be the public spokesman for the council, right?
Yes.
You, okay.
Yes. And the role would be very heavily supervised by myself and the mayor and the board, because he would represent the administration as a whole in any comments or response.
Just one quick question. What kind of qualifications are we gonna put on this particular person?
Very much clerical in nature. I think there's gotta be some established writing and background around potentially notary or paralegal. When we talk about some of the minutes and we talk about some of the requests, what the general statutes allow. So I think there'll be some knowledge of that for public records and public law.
I think maybe an ideal candidate would have some either media experience or dealing with the media experience.
That's good.
Dealing with the public.
You're a retired movie star.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna give our recommendation, but if you have another comment.
Yeah, so I guess the only concerns that I've expressed with you before is the starting salary for it. It's right now listed at pay grade 14. just doing some independent research and what the league had on their website, the state's website, I mean, I think it should be at least bumped up to a minimum of pay grade 17. I know that that's a starting for someone with no experience, and of course, there's some leeway for negotiations there. But I think it'll be appropriate to go ahead and bump that up. I don't know how you guys feel about it.
I agree with that, somewhere between 17 and 18 pay grade.
Corey, I've got a question. When our agenda memo came out, it lists the hiring rate and then it lists a salary range, minimum and maximum. Are we absolutely committed to that hiring rate that is quoted, or is there some flexibility for you within that salary range if you get a really good candidate to maybe make the starting salary higher than the hiring rate, but within the range that we've approved?
That is correct. The hiring rate is an absolute minimum.
And we do have the funds to transfer if we do go higher from other.
I think so. I think we do when we think about this position from a funding perspective. This would interact also with all 5 of the departments. So I think we have multiple accounts to consider. We talk about a social media presence. When we talk about how these folks will be paid, we do have flexibility to negotiate. To clarify, the hiring rate is an absolute minimum with very minimum, if any, experience. And you may say, well, why is there a difference between the minimum range and the minimum for the hiring rate? That is because there's a probationary period for someone that you may be uncertain on, for them to advance and to really prove themselves. And if you look at that, that should be a 5% increase from the bare minimum hiring rate to the minimum salary range. When we take into consideration candidates, we do consider experience, and there is a factor that we use. If someone's got 25 years of media experience, there's a way that we would calculate what their new potential minimum is. So we do have some flexibility there, and I don't know off the top of my head, Timmy may have it, I'm not sure, do you have any ideas what pay 17 or pay 18?
We have about 40.
17 is 43, and then 18 is 46. And from what I've found, according to the league, I think the starting average was 44. Then on the state, it was at about 55. So that puts us right in line with what the starting salary is, or should be. So it's 17 or 18.
The only thing that I noticed, and I'd be glad to look at that data we can decide to change the pay range between now and our February 14th meeting if needed. The only thing I would like to look in more from that was there was a director position versus a information officer, and I'm not sure if that's I would like to look at the job description of that, just make sure it's similar to what we had found.
Well, here's my concern, and Aaron and I discussed it earlier today, and I understand his position. If we set a higher salary level and say that minimum is 43 or 44, and quite frankly, we don't get a candidate that we think should earn that amount, as I understand it, we've established that as being the pay range, so we would have to pay them that amount.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Precedents would be set.
Right, so I almost prefer the salary range and the salary level to be what it is now. And if we get someone with minimum qualifications, we pay them that minimum fee, minimum salary. If we get somebody that we find is highly qualified, then we can certainly get up to 43, 44, and depending on the qualifications, maybe even higher. I just think that the existing pay level that's proposed gives us more flexibility, not knowing what candidates we're going to receive.
You're saying pay level 14?
Yeah, whatever the pay level is that
Councilman Howard, that makes perfect sense. I agree with you 100% on that. That's, because this is it's an important job.
Yeah, it is.
And just anybody cannot do that job. So, you know, I agree with you 100%.
But yeah, as long as we would have the understanding that if somebody highly qualified did come in, that we would have that flexibility. I trust you to use your best judgment on that. But in any event, pushing it forward to full council would give us time to have more discussions and Councilman Cox and I could continue to have that discussion and you could look into some of the data.
And you're saying,
he has.
you're saying the funding's there from the other departments that you transfer in, no matter, with that flexibility.
That's correct.
And that funding source is what, all 5 departments, is that right?
That would be split between your general funds and your water and sewer and electric funds. So there are,
Divided by 3 or by 5.
there are 3 funds that fund all 5 departments.
Okay.
If we approve this in February, how soon you see advertising the position?
We would advertise this position considering that we already had a job description and pay range established. We would advertise first thing that February 15th morning and get it up, at least let it run its minimum 2 to 3 week time period. And we would go ahead and start accepting applications on the 15th.
Corey, will you do the interviewing?
Yes.
This important person report directly to you?
Yes.
And if there are persons that have an interest, even though we haven't set the pay range, are they welcome to at least call you and express that they have that interest?
That's correct. They can turn in applications and specifically identify the public information officer position. We can at least get applications in, but there's state laws that allows us to keep that up for at least, I think, 2 weeks for us to continue to let the general public also know that may not have seen this press release now.
So by law, we would have to
Yes.
post it.
Yes.
You know, the best candidate ever contacted you tomorrow, we still have to post it.
In a realistic time frame, knowing all that and the courtesies we like employees, if needed, I think at the earliest you could get someone in here at the beginning of March, but if you had any type of person actively working that maybe wasn't coming out of retirement, then just had the extra time. I mean, we encourage folks to, look into those 2 week notices. So realistically, for us, 15th of March would probably be where we're at time.
It's a good time.
That would be nice. Okay, so we'll move that forward for further consideration and discussion at our next full council meeting on February, you said it's 14th, Corey?
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day.
Need to make it a short meeting then. The next item that we have for discussion, actually the last item that we have for discussion is an Old National Guard Armory termination of reversion agreement. And Mr. Ellis, did you want to speak on that any at all?
I'm happy to, Councilman High.
Thank you, sir.
The county is applying for the USDA loan to fund the high school. The USDA will not accept a deed that has a reverter clause, we call it. When we deeded the armory to the Board of Education, we put a clause in it that said if it ever ceased to be used for educational purposes, the title would come back to the town. And USDA has asked that we remove that condition so that it frees up the title and can be used as collateral for that loan.
Quick question, that would give, then they could tear it down also, so it gives us no protection whatsoever.
Correct.
The whole point of this thing was to make sure they didn't tear down old buildings, and, I mean, I think I put it in 2007.
Yeah, I mean, again, once we take that condition out,
And why they were taking the name off the building, I thought that was sort of.
I hadn't heard they wanted to remove that one.
No, the only thing they're trying to take away is that right of way.
I would be totally, I mean, if we do a preservation agreement with them, that's fine, where they preserve the building, some type of historic preservation agreement that we write that is better than the one at the hotel. But, I don't think we need to, I have no interest in turning that thing loose and then letting them, then having the ability to tear the building down. I think we need something in place that says the building can has to remain standing. I understand the reversion clause, but that, and I don't have a problem, but we need something to say the building can't be destroyed.
Again, I don't,
I know that's not in front of you, but I think we
Yeah,
need to go back.
my
I would like
sen-
for us to go back and say that to the county.
and we have thrown out, perhaps, you know, it may not be in the legal document, but perhaps a letter from the Board of Education saying, committing to things that are not necessarily on the record.
Well, I think we need to have this one on the record, because then we don't have a Boy Scout hut problem on our hands.
But that's what the request of the county is that the town remove that reverter clause so that the USDA will approve the use of that parcel as collateral for their loan.
Why don't we do this, Corey, the recommendation from, the manager and administration was that, we recommend that it be sent to full council and we just use the next, 3 weeks or so, and perhaps to look at the issue further, but also let you communicate that concern about, we don't want that, building destroyed, and, see if that, would work, communicate that to the county, see if that would work with the USDA. Because we're not gonna vote on it anyway
Yeah,
until next.
but I think we don't need to say, we don't want it destroyed. I think we have to say, we have a way that it cannot be destroyed. And they file something else. They've got to be, I mean, USDA loans money on old buildings all the time, so there's gotta be some way that you can work around this.
Is this the only thing that's holding up that loan?
Who knows?
I don't know, every time we turn around, there's a new
Yeah.
set of rules, but as far as I know, the last thing holding the loan documents from, and the closing instructions from going to the attorney to close the loan from were these reverter clauses. There's some that are in the town, the county, the Board of Education's deeds as well, and they're gonna have to release those the same as we are. If they want the loan to work.
So Councilman Dixon, going back to your concern about the name, the original deed stated condition that the name has to remain the same, and what they're asking that we release or terminate is not the portion related to the
But if you
name.
tear down the buildings and.
Yeah, exactly, no, I agree.
Change the name to take the building.
Yeah.
I just
there's no
say, we kinda got this firestorm going about the scout. I mean, you try to tear down the National Guard Armory, I mean, that's gonna be even, I mean, that's gonna be more of a firestorm. I think we just say, fine, put a protective covenant on it, you can't tear it down, and, you know, give it to PNC, or give it to us, or give it to somebody, the covenant control, and then it's fine. I mean, I'm not saying stand in the way of doing that, but I think that we need to make sure, because the original intent, when we gave it to them, was that building would not be torn down.
And Councilman Dixon, that has also been shared in some of the historic files, that we've reviewed, since last week when we, received the initial, termination agreement. And I do think that was the intent of the council at that time. So I guess one question, can we identify a covenant that doesn't meet the USDA requirements around reversionary clauses? Is that something that could be built into that agreement?
I don't know, you know, doesn't hurt to ask. You know, I don't know how strict, you know, whether they would accept something with restrictive covenants on it, you know, I don't know.
And one thing to share here that's worth noting is this is somewhat fresh, is we did experience an EPA reversion clause that was an obstacle for us for USDA funding for our wastewater treatment plant from 1985. And there was a legal document, to work with that clause, in that deed restriction. And that may be something that we can share, with Hood and the county, going forward, to see if that's the legal vessel to satisfy USDA's requirements, because the reversionary clause for us from the EPA is still there. We working towards the line.
Corey, can you work with Councilman Dixon to make sure that, you know, either in your phone call, you've got a script
Yes.
saying what we need to say, or either seek his assistance in an email that will go to the county, just so it's clear what our intentions are, what our position is on.
Yes.
And I would think that by them using it for collateral, they certainly would not mind the clause in that you can't be torn down.
Yeah, I mean, people loan money on buildings with covenants, you know, every day, you know, half the stuff on my street's got covenants on it. So,
Okay, what I would recommend from our committee is that the two of you work together on communicating that correctly to the county, and that we push this to full council for the February 14th meeting. You need anything, any other clarification?
One question on that, that way we've got time, while Hood's here, would you like to go into closed session with Hood, for any further discussion at full council, to discuss the legal document, legal framework?
Well, we certainly need to have that flexibility
yeah.
to meet with them. And Mayor, that concludes our committee reports.
Thank you, sir.
Thank everyone for your patience.
Okay, the next is our finance committee, and that's chaired by Councilman Dixon.
Yeah, so we have two things on, will you walk through those two budget amendments? Besides Corey, because they deal with the same thing.
So a part of, what's presented in the first budget amendment tonight is the American Rescue Plan Phase 2. A part of our agenda when we met for our planning session was to discuss these funds. The budget amendment that's presented tonight would allocate $735,235 of that revenue, specifically geared towards, and this is what we have got for our initial list. The initial $40,000, we got it towards the purchase of the recycling trailer. One thing to note for that, we have submitted our grant application for the state's matching funds. There's also been a co-grant written with the North Carolina Recycling Partnership to help with us restarting our curbside program. We're shooting for an October date, hopefully, if everything aligns with both grant applications and this allocation. So I did want to share that as part of this budget amendment. The second allocation we have here is we will do $185,000 towards housing. Right now, where we're continuing to explore our options there, and the funding would be geared towards us being able to help to improve the housing situation here locally. The remaining $510,235 would be directly allocated towards recreational use. That is the three amendments that were shown in the budget amendment from the packet. Virginia and I have went through this, and I think we've gotten everything set up that meets all the reporting requirements for the Treasury Department. And we would request that council consider these allocations and recommend that they would be sent to full council.
And I feel like we had a public hearing, we heard the public, we listened to them, and now this is basically after our meeting, that full day meeting we had, planning session, this was the outcome. So I will vote on it next time.
Yes.
Next time, but I mean, I don't know if y'all have anything you want to say now.
Well, I think it's, those dollar amounts are reflective of what the public told us, but also interestingly enough, what our thoughts were anyway.
Yeah.
Corey, I did have a question on the $500,000 towards recreation. There's at least an intent for that $500,000 to include some of the sub-requests that related to recreation, kayaking and kayaking ramps, and also I recall there's been some discussion that if there's enough money that a dog park possibly could be under that under that umbrella, is that right?
And so we tried to include all of our public comments for what we had, and we were able to kind of group everything by category, whether it was recreation, whether it was housing, or whether it was for that last remaining operational need. And so I think Virginia did a really good job of really kind of putting all that together from all the public input that we had received in our December 6th meeting, as well as our discussions at our January 16th planning session. And then Virginia and I have had a lot of internal discussions going through some of the requests that the public made, and we really kind of totaled those numbers. But yes, they do include multiple projects that were presented initially.
And the phase one market study and assessment that we voted on and approved tonight is not paid for out of these funds.
No, sir.
It's gonna be paid for out of our own budget, and hopefully in Electricity's grant, is that right?
That's correct.
But it is a big step, that what we voted on is a big step towards getting a plan in place so we can spend that $500,000 on recreation.
That's correct.
And Corey, this is gonna include like the park on Paxson Lane, things like, I think all that's really important, because I think we heard that just
That's
so
all,
loud.
that's all 5 parks.
Yeah, so for our recreational needs, we knew this was gonna be a large financial commitment. What we really want to do with the folks from the SF Network is really help on the design and any other items that maybe we hadn't heard from the general public that are really necessary improvements at parks, that their background and their experience could help us bring to the table. For example, like we talked about the fitness and wellness piece, that may be something that needs to be incorporated
At
into
those
these designs that the general public just didn't bring forward. And so, yes,
And we're also looking at picnic tables, benches, grills,
yes, yes,
in addition to playground equipment and fitness.
yes.
I appreciate y'all working on this. I don't think anybody imagined that we would be able to start this quickly on working towards some of those goals that the public asked us to concentrate on, so I appreciate it. I know I didn't think we'd be moving this quick.
We're listening to what they say.
But I thank you guys for jumping on.
Thanks for Virginia for navigating.
Thank you.
Thanks, Virginia.
the legal language.
Virginia, they're really giving you a lot of accolades tonight.
Corey knows some of my feelings. I just do want to interject really quick that anything that we do with these ARPA funds cannot be revenue generating projects. So if we do the sports complex or anything like that, it has to be non-revenue generating. So, providing kayaks to citizens, that is not revenue generating. But, certainly opening the stadium and charging admission would be. So we need to keep that in mind.
Thank you.
In the second amendment here, that was brought forward, this is really 2 parts. Hearing the sentiment around the stipend recommendation, what we can do is revisit this, and have a revised budget showing with or without that. But the key piece here was, there's also the travel increases, and this is just to make sure that we had, from our last meeting, the travel expenses, which are a little higher than normal, budgeted for us to travel to the Main Street Conference. So a portion of this increase is specifically towards the travel line item that's there.
When is that conference, by the way? I know you guys are going.
The end of March, I think it's the 25th through 27th,
And where's that located?
Boston, Massachusetts.
You have to say that right, it's Boston.
Last time I said it really well. So we can revise the budget amendment if this is decided to go to full council to reflect the stipend variability.
Possibility at a different time.
That's
Yeah.
fine, yeah. We just send it forward, that's fine.
Yeah.
I think that's it for us.
All right, and last but not least, Public Works, and that's chaired by Councilman Miller.
Mayor, we just have one item of business, no parking designation for 106 South Oakland Street. Mayor, the resident residing and operating a business at 106 South Oakland Street, next door to the Downey Preservation, has requested no parking designation markings be placed on the street in front of this driveway entrance. As routine habit, random citizens and occasionally down east business customers will park their vehicles in front of this resident's driveway and entrance, prohibiting the resident from entering and exiting his own driveway. David Myers, Public Works Director, upon review of this request, is okay with the no parking designation. I'd like to move this to full council.
And just to clarify, we did speak with the residents about this, and we also spoke with the local businesses who run into these types of situations. When former commercial properties become reactive here, residential. And just a point of clarity here, any new designations that aren't existing does require full council approval, and this is an example of that.
All right, that concludes our agenda. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion to second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.